2, 1. Good, and we are live. Welcome everyone to another episode of Making Orlando a Better Place. We have a special guest today, Tobias Svantesson. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that earlier, but Tobias was actually a former ATP professional tennis player, originally from Sweden. He enjoyed most of his tennis success of playing doubles. I got most of this off of online too, so you can also correct me if I'm wrong on this, but during his career, he won 2 doubles. He achieved most of his career high doubles rankings, and he reached number 65 in 1991. And his career world ranking in singles was 89. Are both those stats correct?
Yes, they are.
Oh, there
I'll
you go.
take
Okay.
it. Yep.
So
Yep.
Tobias is also the president and founder of eTennis, which is in Winter Park, Florida. eTennis provides expert tennis services and all tennis products to all the people of Central Florida and in the Orlando area. And they have been serving aces locally ever since 1999. So welcome, Tobias, to the podcast. And we pretty much want to talk all things tennis. So given that intro and some of your professional career, what were some of the highlights of being a pro tennis player, just to start off with that?
Well, I went to college here and didn't really have any plans on going pro. So actually, probably my most exciting and interesting moments were early on, because I was kind of just thrown out there, and I wasn't. I was a late bloomer and kind of blossomed in college a little bit and so on. But I was when I first started playing, I didn't really know what was going on, and I was out there by myself, and I didn't really have a lot of mentors in that sense. I had a friend of mine who had turned pro a year earlier, so he was pointing the way a little bit, but I really hadn't grown up with that end goal. So everything was super exciting, and I mean, everything was new, and that was fantastic, and so on, obviously. And I plowed through those early layers of the lower level tournaments and stuff, and then got on and played the bigger stuff, which, you know, is obviously amazingly interesting. But the whole road is from start to finish. It's a grueling deal, and I mean, I was, you know, ranked in the top 100, but I was certainly not in the top 5, and that's a different planet for those guys. So I mean, it's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of ups and downs, and I mean, certainly some events are more interesting than others, and there's a lot of good times, a lot of bad times on that. You know, I was out there for 8.5 years, and but probably in the beginning, it was because it was something that I had never even thought about doing, quite frankly, except possibly in my dreams when I was 10 years old and imitating Borg or something. But I mean, it was really not. I played tennis for fun until very late in my teens. I mean, it was kind of something I enjoyed doing, but not with the goal of playing professional. So everything was new, and I think that's it's great to play the big Grand Slams and stuff, but just getting out there and doing something that you really wasn't planning on doing was truly exciting.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that, like, we could talk about your whole professional career and what it's like to be a professional tennis player, but I always wondered, how rough is it with the time change and traveling to other countries? Does that play a major effect when competing at that high level, where you're sleeping in another bed, the time change is messing up? Like, some of the Olympians were winning gold medals at 4:30 in the morning US time. Like, how hard is it to like kind of accommodate with the time change and traveling to other countries? Does that really mess you up, or when it's game time, you put it behind you and you just play?
No, I mean, it's a massive problem. And I mean, tennis and golf, I think, are the only sports where you have that reality every week. Because I mean, especially, I mean, when you're a lower ranked player, you play wherever you get in. So I mean, if that tournament is in Seattle, or if that tournament is in Stockholm, or if that's in, you know, Miami, you go there. And you may not know until a few weeks before that you have to be in that location. And sometimes you lose early, and you know, hustle to get onto a different tournament and on a different continent and so on. So I mean, that is something that people don't understand, and it's kind of funny when you know, I see some of the basketball players and stuff, they complain when they have to go from LA to New York and stuff, and they, you know, so on. But a lot of tennis players and golfers are living with that all the time. You try to get as much rest as you can, but and you try to learn to sleep when you have downtime, whatever time it is. But it's certainly something that's unique, and like you said, I mean, when it's game time, you better put the game face on and do the best you can. Doesn't mean that you're always prepared as well as you probably should be, and that obviously affects the players who don't have now it seems like everybody had a staff of 5 or 6 people traveling around and doing everything. When you're kind of roaming around on your own a little bit, it's a little different. So it's quite a bit on your plate to deal with, and the time change is certainly physically pretty demanding.
Yeah, and maybe it's even worse if you go deeper in a tournament, just because the next city you go to, you only have a couple days to get rid of the jet lag or to get used to the time change, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And that, I mean, you've been traveling around out there, so I mean, you know how it is. And I mean, sometimes it starts raining and you're sitting there for 2 extra days, but but on Monday you have to be somewhere else, and you're sitting there, and you just have to deal with it. There's no way around it. So, I mean, that's part of the excitement.
Yeah. Michael, you have any other questions about professional tennis before we dig into eTennis?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd love to hear. So you're originally from Sweden, right?
Correct.
Now, when did you come to the States? And I know you said you played college tennis. Where did you play at?
I was an exchange student first up in Virginia for a year in 100 years ago. But then I went back to Sweden for a while, and I went back to the US the following year and actually played a year at Seminole Community College. And I had a good friend of mine that I'd sent there a year before, who ended up, Michael Pernfors, who ended up being top 10 in the world. We grew up together and so on. So he was at Seminole, I followed him, and then we split ways. I went to a different school in the Midwest for a year, and then I graduated from Flagler College in St. Augustine and won the national championships there in singles and doubles and the team events. And that was actually quite an interesting time too, because I was really, again, I was getting my business degree. I wasn't going there to play tennis, but that tournament was, at that time, it was a 256 draw in singles and 128 draw in doubles. So it was a ridiculous amount of matches, and we played 4 matches the first day and so on. It was, every day was multiple amount of matches, and it was an exciting time, and it was physically pretty demanding, but it worked out well for me. But it was a brutal one, but it was an exciting end to my college career, and then I just kept on playing after that. So
okay, I've never heard of a 256 person draw. Is that 8 rounds?
That is 8 rounds. It's a NAIA. That's how they used to do it back then. I think they pared it down now, because I think it was logistically kind of a nightmare for them as well. But I mean, obviously, admittedly, some of the matches were not as challenging, but you still have to step up and play two sets, and it's a lot of tennis, and then they threw in a doubles at the end of the day or something. But a lot of matches. Yeah,
so then
I think it was 15 matches in 5 days or something, I think I had. So
oh my goodness, that's injuries waiting to happen there.
Yeah. True.
My goodness. So after you won the tournament, that's when you transitioned onto the pro tour and started.
Yeah, playing. I mean, before a couple of months leading up to it, some people have said because I didn't lose a ton of matches in my last year in college, I was doing quite well and so on. And but I didn't. I played some money tournaments and so on, and obviously knew that I could play a little bit, but I didn't know what it entailed. It was just something, go out there and play. At that time, they were called satellites. Now they're called ITF tournaments, and you went out. And if you lost, you went home, and if you won, you stayed out there. And I had a little VW microbus, and I drove around for a couple of years and tooled around and collected points and collected a few dollars here and there and moved on. And then I finally broke through and got moving on to a slightly different level. So that was interesting times.
I love it. So give me some of your favorite memories from the tour.
I went through 3 clutches on my bus. That was interesting. But I had some interesting matches. I lost to Mats Wilander at the Australian Open in 5 sets, and I had no business being on the court with him, in my opinion. But there I was and there's nobody watching the match. It was a first round match, and all of a sudden we were in the 5th set, and the stadium was basically full, and that was kind of exciting.
What tournament was that?
Australian Open.
Okay, that's super cool.
Yeah, so I played a lot of the big boys. I beat Becker and Zivinovic at the Australian Open one year in doubles. I beat the number 1 team in the world in doubles in San Francisco at some point. Scott Davis and David Pate at that time. So I had some interesting results. I had a lot of close losses that would have changed my ranking dramatically, but they didn't. So played Lendl, played a lot of the top guys, but lots of good stuff, but wasn't quite getting it done to the top level. But I have no regrets whatsoever. It was exciting times.
Those are some pretty big names, though. What was the favorite of those big names that you played? What was your favorite match or favorite person that you played?
I mean, I played Anders Gomes in a tournament in Boston again, where I had a lead with him, but he had just won the French Open, and I was up a set in the break there, and we had a fantastic match. It was great. I just ran out of juice, and that was it. I mean, I had one most interesting match. Probably I played Leconte at Wimbledon, Henri Leconte from France, and I had never felt so small in my life. I mean, I'm a decently big guy, but he just made me feel like I was, 2 feet tall. He could do anything with that ball, and he could put it wherever he wanted to. I don't know if he knew where he was going, but you just hoping that he was going to hit it to you, because he was impossible to read. Very, very challenging. And I didn't win that match, but it was quite a lesson in tennis for me.
Nice. I loved watching him play. Watching old videos of him. And do you still
incredibly talented. Pardon?
Do you still stay in contact with anyone that you played with in the past?
Yes, some. I mean, I have some friends that have had higher rankings than I did, who are still playing exhibitions and stuff, and I sometimes get invited to fill in when they lose, somebody gets injured or something. So I see them on occasion, but we have a loose relationship. If I see people, then it's not like I'm buddies with a lot of them, but if we run into each other at an event, or if I go to US Open and I see somebody, then you all of a sudden reconnect. It's a loose network of a lot of old acquaintances that you can connect with very quickly when you need to. So it's Facebook has been very interesting that way, because that's you see what everybody's doing, and some people are doing this and they're living here and there. So when you go to a city, you can call somebody up and say, hey, I'm in town, do you want to hit some balls or something? So I mean, it's been fun to make those connections and keep them.
That's awesome. I feel like we're a little bit of a kindred spirit, just in the fact that, number one, I love tennis and love talking about it. So really glad that you're on. And two, spent some time on tour myself, just as a therapist on the WTA tour. So nothing at the level that you were. I was a nobody, but super cool to get to share some experiences and hear from your end what it was like. So when did you retire from tennis, and kind of what have you been doing since then?
I retired in the end of '93. I had my son was born in August '93, and I was kind of done at that time anyway. Mentally, I think I was done, and played a few more months after he was born, and then I had already. At some point, you just don't want to do it anymore. Your mind is looking elsewhere, and I was certainly looking elsewhere. And
how old were you at that time? How old were you in '93?
30.
Okay.
So at that time, that was, most people quit at that time, and I started late. So I mean, it was, but we didn't have the same. I'm not going to go there, but didn't have as much help, I think, staying physically as at the top of the game as they do today. But so the body was done, mentally it was done, and obviously it comes down to finances. At some point, you look at the bank book and you say, hey, can we do something else to make more money than we're doing right now? So, and since then, I got a job pretty quickly as a tennis director at a local club here. And I was there for a year and a half, but I really wasn't interested in staying in tennis at that time. So I got involved pretty quickly working in sales, medical equipment company that I knew somebody who worked at. And then it led to something else where I was working in sales for a couple of national companies out of Texas in different types of sales, and didn't play much tennis for a while. And then got laid off and started training a little bit and competing. I played a couple of tournaments, and then this eTennis thing came up based on a guy that actually mentioned it to me, that he wanted me to start a golf franchise golf was super hot at the time, and everybody was starting a golf store or something. And I played a little golf, but I was certainly not a golf fanatic or anything. But and then I started looking at it and said, well, I think if I'm going to do anything in retail, it probably should be in tennis. So that's where that came up. And I started that in 1999.
Okay.
And off we went.
Yeah, that would be a good segment to go into, talking about what is eTennis. So for some of our followers who don't know you and don't know what eTennis is, many people may think it's an online tennis store, but what exactly is eTennis and what services do you provide there?
Well, and that's a good question, because I mean, it was actually my wife's idea, because when we started this, everything was and the business was actually started as we were trying to import some strings. I had some connections with some companies in the UK, primarily that I used their strings and grips and so on. And they were manufacturers. And we were actually trying to sell the strings in the US to colleges and become a distributor. And that's really where the E thing came from. I mean, E stood for experts, but it was obviously a tie-in with e-commerce and everything else that was blowing up at that time. And it ended up that we didn't really, it was a lot of work and it was a lot of very difficult to do, but we had a physical store as well, and everybody wanted to get the rackets strong, and everybody wanted to buy rackets and everything else here, because we didn't have a store. We didn't have any good stores in town at the time. And there's been a lot of small little stores that have tried to make it go, but it was a tough deal. So there was an opening to have a retail store. And I think it evolved organically very quickly into something that was going to be a physical store. And I get questions about the E thing all the time. And sometimes we say, oh, why are you just selling online? And I mean, our business is probably 1% online, if that. So, I mean, we are definitely a brick and mortar store that is absolutely focused on the local market. I mean, it's fun to do some stuff online, but it's a different business than what we are doing, and it's a big business, and four or five companies basically own that business in the US. I mean, everybody else is fighting for 10% of the market. So yeah, we're much better focusing on what we can do, what we do best, which is customer service and knowledge and everything else on a local level.
You mentioned that someone who wanted to open some golf franchise stores gave you the bug as well. Did you ever do anything with golf, or was it mainly just tennis?
No. It was no. This was somebody who'd started a franchise in Texas, and we had worked together in a previous company that I was involved with, and he said, you got to open this in Florida. It's going to be fantastic. And I looked at the prospectus, I looked at all the paperwork, and it said golf everywhere, and it just didn't excite me that much. And so I said, hey, but for the retail piece, maybe that's an interesting angle, because I needed something else to do. I wanted to do something else, and I started Miss Tennis again, and off we went.
Awesome. Now, what would you say most customers come to eTennis to buy? Do you specialize in something, or is there something you're specifically known for?
Yes. I mean, we have a tremendous selection of rackets, shoes, and we string about 6,000 rackets a year. So, I mean, we are a very technical shop with technical knowledge. We have knowledgeable people working there. We have, I call it a no BS shop, if I can say that.
Yes, you can.
We are very much trying to keep customers for life. And it's actually very interesting, because we've been there long enough now where I have little kids that used to come in with their parents, and now they're coming in themselves and so on, because they were treated right, and now they're coming in and they're 25 years old and they're just back from college. They want to play tennis, and they're coming back to us to buy a racket and so on. And we remember when they were 10 and they were just starting to play. So cool. Yeah, we've held on to a very personal relationship with our customers, and our pricing is, we're matching everything online. There's no way you can stay in business otherwise. So it's just that we're adding the personal touch, and we're very knowledgeable about what we're selling, and we're not, we want that customer to come back. We're not pushy. We're trying to make sure that they understand that, we're going to be here for a long time, and we want to be your store of choice for everything tennis. And now, which is interesting, I mean, now people are coming to us for pickleball because that's growing so quickly, and we're certainly, there's so much synergy between pickleball and tennis, as well as the players are essentially the same. Either they're existing tennis players or previous tennis players, but they know us and they know that we know our stuff. So when we are getting into pickleball, they are assuming that we know something about that too. So I'd say that people are coming to us because, first of all, there's not a ton of options. Quite frankly, most of the clubs have checked out of the business because it's too difficult. But we've done a good job, and we try our best to make the experience a pleasant one when they come in.
Can Michael buy a tennis lesson from you so I don't whoop him so bad whenever I play him in one-on-one?
Yeah, he certainly can. I teach 15, 20 hours a week now. So I've actually, the last few years, I've gotten back in on the court, and I'm teaching quite a bit. So I'm sure we can arrange that.
Nice, good.
We'll do a group lesson. How about that, Ron?
Okay.
Group special.
Okay, that's fine. So it sounds like the market is kind of showing you that there's a need and a want for some pickleball. So that's really interesting as a business owner, how you can adapt and add on additional services. It sounds like the market's saying, hey, there's a need for some pickleball advice and services and at least equipment and stuff like that. So that'll be a cool little avenue or sub niche to tap into if people are willing to come there and use your services still.
Yeah, no, it's been very interesting. I mean, first of all, I have to mention that we have had COVID was obviously tough on an awful lot of businesses, but everybody started playing tennis. People who had never played tennis before started playing. People who had played 10 years ago, they couldn't go to the gym anymore. And, everything they used to do for physical fitness was kind of put on hold. Whereas tennis courts, we have 800-900 tennis courts, public tennis court, not counting the private stuff in Orlando. So everybody was craving doing something. So we had a little bit of a letdown, obviously, when everything got crazy, shut down initially, but then it's gone completely nuts. So, I mean, it's been fun to see that people are, because tennis before had been kind of in a questionable state, I think, and now it's people have rediscovered it. And I mean, it's such a fantastic lifelong sport, and people are really grasping that, hey, it can be in a tremendous workout as well. And the pickleball has just added to it. So we are sitting in a nice place now, and I think with it's been very challenging with the internet and everything else, but I mean, I think tennis is bigger than all of us, and I mean, it's such a mental game and a physical game, and all the aspects of it that eventually makes everything break down, which is where you guys come in. But it is a fantastic sport, and I think it's been fun to see that people are still holding on to racket sports, because I mean, that's again what pickleball is. I mean, it's still a racket sport in my view.
Yeah, and it's a sport you can play for life too. So
correct,
that's the biggest draw.
Yep.
Yeah. How big is the business? How many staff do you have? And do you have any other tennis pros or tennis experts that do lessons there? Or how big's the staff?
We got about 10 people about now. And that's been about, I've had anywhere from up to 12 and so on. But we have a pretty nice group right now. And 10 is the number that I think is what warrants what we're doing at the moment. We have nobody else who's teaching. Well, I have a couple of my stringers are working as stringers as well as teaching pros. But again, they don't teach through the store. I mean, most of us, or I do my teaching at Winter Park Tennis Center, which is 5 minutes away. And the other stringers we have, that's where they do their teaching as well. But everybody plays tennis, and we understand the language when people come in. But it's been it's a pretty busy shop, and like I said, the numbers are decent, pretty good, and it's for being a tennis shop, it's a good sized tennis shop.
Nice, Michael.
Really cool.
Do you have any other questions regarding eTennis and the business side of things before we start getting into specifics about injury prevention and stuff?
I think, yeah, maybe just the last thing is, so you have the tennis side of things, the equipment and shoes and stringing, and then also added on the pickleball. Is there anything else that you see coming in the future, or is it pretty much good where it's at?
No, I mean, we have everything. I mean, you asked earlier about what are the big pieces. I mean, the big buckets for us are the shoes, for rackets, and the stringing. But I mean, we have tons of apparel, and we have tons of sun protective apparel, which people are getting very into right now to protect the skin. So I mean, long sleeve shirts and so on. I mean, we have absolutely everything from accessories to knickknacks and gifts and pro bars and food things and so on, anything that anybody could use. But those are extras, and yeah, people come in and buy a grip and walk out of there, that's fine. But I think why we stand out is because we do such a good job with the big pieces of it, which is, people need a racket that's suited for them. And
yeah,
I know we're going to start talking about that, because I mean, there's an awful lot of misinformation out there about equipment. So I mean, and that's where you guys have to save half the tennis population, but which is good for you. But that's no, we do everything, and I don't know what else is going to happen. I mean, pickleball is another sport that's growing tremendously in Europe, and they're starting to get it in here. It's called padel. That's what they pronounce it here, but it's called paddle in Europe. But it's a similar type, much quicker sport than pickleball. But who knows what other racket sports? There's something. There's a group that plays beach tennis now on tennis courts.
I heard about that.
Yeah, they played on tennis courts, and it looks like a ton of fun. But I mean, there's like 20 people playing it, so it's a little hard to build a business around it. But who knows what's going to blow up? I mean, we don't know.
Perfect. So let's bridge the gap and talk a little bit of injury prevention. So when someone comes to you and wants a racket, whether it's the racket size, the grip, the strings, what is an example process of what you go through to find the perfect racket with the perfect grip, with the strings, for a person just starting out tennis, or even an expert? Like, what's your process of how you look at things to fit that great racket to that individual?
We take ourselves out of the process to some degree. We have a demo program. So some people don't have a clue and they're looking for advice. Today, an awful lot of people come in armed with tons of knowledge because they've been watching everything on YouTube. They have done a ton of research on tennis sites where you have little 10-year-olds that give racket advice to people and so on. It's wonderful. So some of them are very knowledgeable. Some of them have no knowledge whatsoever, or they have wrong knowledge. But we have to be really careful there, because there is so much information out there, and some people know more than we do because they have really listened to the right people, and some people are completely misled because they had a little 10-year-old kid that told them they should play with this racket because that's what Federer is using, so that must be the best thing for them. But I mean, normally we start with their experience in terms of sports in general. If they played tennis before, are they new to the game? Do they have any injuries? Because which is obviously your interest as well. But I mean, we want people to play. So we want people to stay healthy. And if I know that somebody comes in and they want to buy the stiffest racket we have in the store because they know that that's one of the top pros that he's using, and I'm like, what's the motivation behind that? Well, so-and-so plays with it. It must be a great racket. I said, I know, but you had 3 arm surgeries, so maybe you shouldn't have that racket. Yeah. And that's really where we go initially. There's obviously so many aspects of rackets today, and a lot of them there are some arm-friendly rackets. There are a lot of rackets that are definitely not arm-friendly. And I mean, a lot of our injuries that we see that are tennis-related are equipment related. I mean, to some degree, poor technique, but a lot of it's the wrong size grip, too heavy or too light or too stiff. There's an awful lot of aspects that need to be addressed. But like I said, we want people to kind of go and take a couple of demo rackets out, go out and bang them around and play them, and come back to us, say, hey, this one worked great, this one didn't work at all. And then we have a little bit of a starting point and can push them in one direction or another based on those specs on the racket that they like. We're very neutral in terms of what we like. I mean, I like rackets that the customer likes. I mean, I don't really care what the brand is. We carry all the major brands, and we're not locked in with anybody. But we're trying to get ourselves out of telling them you need this racket because that should fit you great. Because I don't really know if they know what type of player they are. So when they start telling me that, no, I'm really good. I can hit it really hard and I have perfect control and I have all the power I want. And then I go out and see them play and they're really just starting to play. And I don't want to, that's not my job. So let that person take the racket out and they can figure it out on their own. And then we can make sure that we guide them and push them a little bit in the right direction, ask the right questions. We try to ask an awful lot of questions and then let them, make the final decision. So
I could see how like the racket size and the string tension could affect or predispose someone to getting injury. How does grip and the grip size affect stuff? Any specific examples of, I'm not sure what to talk about with small grip, thicker grip, how does that play into it? And then Michael, you can add in stuff too from your experience also.
Yeah, there's an old, which works pretty well. I mean, if you grab a tennis racket by the handle, you should be able to put a comfortable index finger in between it looks like this, okay? That is the optimum size, but that's based on measurement. You can also measure the length of your fingers, and that's really where you should be because that's the optimum size. Doesn't mean you have to be there, but the sizes vary from 4 inches to 4 3/4 inches on a racket. So it doesn't make any sense that if a lady comes in and she has a really small hand, that she should play with the same racket as somebody who comes in who has should have a basically a 5/8 or a 4 3/4 grip because of his hand size. But we see it all the time where people are coming in. I just picked it up. My pro sold it to me because it was his old demo, so I just got it, and it's okay, or it doesn't work very well either way. But I'm like, what about the grip size? So that's a huge piece what we deal with because people just pick up a racket, they look at price, or they pick it up in a box store or something, and there was a great price. It was $79. It used to be $129, so it's probably going to be great. But they have no idea looking at the grip, for example. And the grip is based on the hand size. And if it's too small, you're going to squeeze way too hard, which is going to cause all kinds of issues, tennis elbow or golfer's elbow, either one. And if it's too big, you're not going to be able to hold on to it. So when you're fully stretched out, and if it's too big, you can't quite grasp it, you're going to lose for racket. And then you have to be, holding on to that for dear life as well to hold on to it. So that's a big piece of what we're talking about. And people just don't, a lot of times don't look at it. And the pros have influenced that a little bit too, because the game has changed so much the last few years or like 10 years. And some of the pros are playing with much smaller grips because they're using so much more wrist these days. But again, that relates very little to our customers because they are not playing like the people on TV do. They are trying to play tennis and get the ball in the court. So they're not going to rotate their wrist around, like it's on a ball there, which the pros do. So the game is not the same. And that's probably one of the biggest differences today compared to, 20 years ago, because most amateurs they played a little bit like the pros in terms of strokes and so on. Now it's a different planet. You don't see it, and the people who do try to emulate the pros, they end up getting quite hurt most of the time.
Michael, regarding grip size and injuries or injury prevention?
I have, yeah. And I think this is a really important discussion just because clinically, a lot of times when a tennis players come to see me in the clinic, usually there's some kind of tissue damage or shoulder injury, tendonitis, whatever it might be, that yes, maybe there's weakness or inflexibility or immobility, but also there's a lot of low-hanging fruit of, hey, what's your grip size? What's your string tension? What's your racket type stiffness? How heavy is it? So a lot of low-hanging fruit that you can grab onto and change without even doing any treatment and decrease their pain. And by sending someone to you who's an expert in this stuff and knowing, yes, you don't want to tell them what they should what they should have, but you can kind of guide them in the right direction. And I can speak from experience. In my own injuries, I had a pretty bad elbow injury in high school. I remember switching to a super stiff racket. I strung it at like 62 pounds, full polyester. My grip size was too big, which was causing some elbow tendonitis as well. So yeah, I was a skinny kid in high school, but I could have probably prevented a lot of the injuries I had. I think going to physical therapy helped me, but also making some easy equipment changes. So I guess my question to you is, for someone experiencing shoulder, elbow, wrist pain that comes into your store, what are some of the equipment modifications that you recommend in terms of all those things with different types of strings even?
Well, again, I mean, we're not doctors at all, so we definitely go after the low-hanging fruits. I mean, somebody comes in to me and they said, my arm is really, hurting. I'm so, okay. Well, what kind of string do you have? Okay, well, 100% polyester. We're stringing it too tight. You have the stiffest racket, or one of the stiffer rackets. We can change those things immediately. We can get that string needs to be out of there. If you want to be pain-free or have less pain, you probably ought to look at a different racket. We can see maybe the racket's too light. The lighter racket tend to vibrate a lot more, and it has a lot higher pitch vibration, which tend to irritate more arms and anything else. And you also have, it could be too heavy as well. I mean, if you can't get it up and running, then you're going to be late on everything, and that's can also be a problem. So, I mean, you can be too light or too heavy. Right. But a lot of people, rackets have gotten lighter these days, and that's not necessarily a good thing, because there's an awful lot of people who come out and swing, take a full crack at everything, and they need a heavy racket, because that light racket is colliding with the ball, and there's not enough force to go through it. So all the shock that's hitting the strings is now going right up to your arm. So there's a lot of things that we do before we send them off to, and we hope to catch them before they get 12 cortisone shots in their shoulder and stuff. That's tend to be what people want to do. They're looking for the easy pill. But there's I mean, the string thing is something else, I mean, which we can talk about. I don't know if you want to talk about that now, but that's I think where the manufacturers have really they're getting a little crazy with it.
Let's talk about that. As a novice, like, what's the difference between string tension and how do you approach that whole thing versus a lighter tension, a harder tension? What's your process or your thoughts on string tension?
Well, everything else being equal, a lower tension will be more comfortable and give you more power. Okay, it's going to be more arm friendly. The more tension you have, you're going to have a little bit more control of it. But you're losing power because the ball is not being pocketed as much. So it's going to just come off. And that's something that some people have that reversed. Some people used to string their racket 62 pounds in high school, and they're going to string the racket 62 pounds today. And the rackets are so different today than they were 20, 30 years ago. And our customers, a lot of our customers are middle-aged. They haven't played high school tennis for 30 some years. So their arm is different and the equipment is way different. And they don't want to change. That number that they had in mind when they were 15 years old is still a good number to them. So that's something, but the polyester strings, which is something that's blossomed. I mean, I played with polyester 100 years ago, but now it's really taken over on the pro tour and on the amateur level. But polyester strings are extremely stiff. They have zero power, and the real benefit is that they are stiff, and when they do move, they are very quick to align again. So they do something called snapback, which is creating a tremendous amount of spin, which is why the pros like it so much, because they get almost a artificial amount of spin on the ball, which is why it's so different, and everybody wants to do that, but it requires an incredible amount of racket speed, which most people locally are not capable of generating. So there's very little benefit to using that type of string unless you're a heavy duty string breaker, because their strings are also very, very durable, but they are ridiculously stiff, and they're really difficult for amateurs to reach the benefits of why the pros are using them. So it's a tough sell, and unfortunately the manufacturers are selling it as, you know, the best of all worlds. You get more power, you get more, you know, more spin, you get more everything, you get more wins, you get more money, and it's really doing nothing except ripping people's arms apart to the most part.
And one of the things I've found helpful in recommendation on my end of things is because a lot of my patients that I've had really like the polyester string. They like the way it feels. They like the way the ball comes off the racket, and they don't want to switch from it. They've been using it for the last 20, 30 years. But I think something that's been helpful was hybrid stringing, to where you're kind of getting a mix. And I'm sure you do a lot of that at your store as well, where you're not completely changing the string, but you're getting a mix of the crosses and the mains, still getting the good feel, but making it softer on the arm. So I'm sure you guys do a lot of that as well.
Yeah, we do a lot of that, and that's obviously taking the edge off a little bit. And again, going back to the power, and that's where some people don't, they see themselves getting more power on polyester, and you know, so we have a discussion about that. And I mean, it's proven there is hardly any power in a polyester string, but what it does is it allows you to swing faster. And when you swing faster without getting the ball out, you feel like you're getting a lot of power. So people are pounding this ball, but it's not going very fast, but they're hitting it, so they're swinging so much harder. So they get the sensation in their arm that, wow, we're really cranking this ball. But they could swing probably, you know, 70% pace with a softer string, and the ball would travel at the same speed. And that's that's why some of those injuries are getting pretty severe, because they are being forced to hit the ball so hard to get the ball to go. The strings never break, so the string get dead after a while, and the more dead it gets, the less power you have out of it, and now you have to swing even harder. So I mean, it's an evil cycle. But like you said, we have the same argument discussions with people. Oh, I really like the way it feels. I'm like, well, yeah, I know, but you can't brush your teeth at night because your arm is falling off. So I mean, is it worth the price? I mean, that's kind of, you know, so that's it's a tough discussion. But I mean, they talk about, they hype it on TV, they hype it in the ads and so on, and it's not a string meant for, you know, your average. It's great for junior players who are just, you know, cranking it up and breaking a lot of strings and keeping the ball in. But for most, you know, mid-level players, it's really not the best choice.
Yeah, so I think for some of our average tennis players that are watching this, a good first line of defense would be simply going to somewhere like eTennis and figuring out, hey, is my racket super stiff? Is my string tension way too high? Try to take care of some of those simplest stuff first. If they have an injury, would be a good idea.
And I mean, a lot of times they do, but I mean, it's remarkable how many times we hear people coming in and say, yeah, so do you want to try something else? I really like it. I know, but your arm is really hurting. I say, yeah, I just like it. I want to do the same. Okay, there's nothing we can do. I mean, it's just, that's up to you. And,
yeah, and I've experienced the same thing with some patients as well. It's like, oh, your arm's falling off. Do you want to try to maybe lower your tension or change your string? Like, no, I love it. I'm not going to change it. So it's a hard battle to fight sometimes.
Yes, it is.
Even now we have a resource with you guys is also for our tennis athletes that come in, whether it's a novice person or someone who's playing in like a women's league, all throughout Orlando. Now we can take care of the medical stuff, and we can take care of the rehab portion, and we can send them to you now. At least they can take a look at the racket and make some modifications that way to not only just get pain-free now, but to prevent any reoccurring injury rates that way too. So we take a really holistic, long-term approach with a lot of our athletes. We don't just want to get them pain-free and back to sport now. We also want to prevent any reoccurring injuries from happening down the line. So we kind of pride ourselves in solving the root cause of someone's pain and identifying any underlying impairments and getting the perfect racket that fits that person, that allows them to play at the level they want but prevent injuries. I mean, that's a no-brainer there. That's an essential step that we need to take to get the best long-term outcome.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely something we can help each other with, because I mean, we certainly see people, and we send people off to, and we try to do the low-hanging fruit like we talked about earlier, but obviously we can't fix them after that. But there are certainly things that can be done, and you can change rackets too. Even if they have a racket that they really like, you can change the weight on it a little bit, you can change the balance of it and so on. which means it's going to behave differently. So that's something that that we do as well. I mean, we do a lot of customization for people who, just love their racket, but they like to tweak it a little bit. And a lot of times we end up with a better result from a comfort standpoint as well that way.
What are some of the most common injuries that you see at your business that people complain of?
We certainly have the arm is a big one. I mean, we have the wrist and the elbow. I mean, golf and tennis elbow is probably number one. Wrist is probably number two, and shoulders number three. But I mean, it's all related to that the swinging action. But we also have a lot of, I mean, like I said, we have we have a relatively mature audience. So, I mean, it's, we see a lot of calf strains, plantar fasciitis, and knee problems too, but they're not necessarily caused by tennis. I mean, it's just, natural life. But from just the sheer tennis, it's certainly the wrist, elbow, and shoulder. Those are the big ones.
One thing that I see a lot of is unilateral lower back pain. It's not just a general back pain that goes across the whole back. It's one-sided. And it's always exacerbated with either serving, or they'll say with their forehand or backhand. I see a lot of that. And a lot of it's from like tight hips where they don't have full hip extension or back extension. So they compress during the serve. And then normally they'll always tell me it's on one side, and then the forehand causes it or their backhand causes it. It's all because of their hips half the time, because they don't have enough hip mobility to be able to perform the tasks and stuff. So I've been seeing that a lot recently in the past year or so. I'm not sure if it's just because of back pain, or I'm seeing a lot of that with tennis players recently.
Well, I can sign up for that. So you can book me next week. I'll come in because I'm right in that category. So I'm right there.
I love it. I know you mentioned a little bit earlier about some of the times of the tour back in the day and retiring a little bit earlier and injury prevention being different then. What are some of the differences between what injury prevention was like back on tour when you were playing versus what it is now?
Well, I mean, when I was playing, I mean, you hope to find an ice bag somewhere, and then if you could find the trainer, that was great. But there was usually 25 other guys who wanted to find the trainer. Sure. I believe today, I mean, the bigger tournament certainly had a little more staff, but a lot of times there wasn't that much support in that regard. I think that you had to be pretty good at listening to your body and finding out, when it was something real or something serious versus, we can probably pray through this. Let's take a couple of aspirins and let's get on with it. And then we ice like crazy afterwards. But today, I think there's first of all, that it's a different game from a financial aspect, from, the players, the sponsors, and the organizers. I think everybody wants to keep people afloat and alive. And I think they are, from what I understand, the tournaments are taking a much bigger approach, more serious approach about that aspect of it. Plus, I mean, I think a lot of the guys or the women as well, they're traveling with teams now where they have their own staff. I mean, when I was playing, it was most of the top guys had a few people with them, but outside of the top 20, most of the people had maybe one person, if that. So, I mean, there wasn't a psychiatrist and a trainer and everything else part of the package. That wasn't it. Now everybody, I think, is understanding that if your body is not operating at full capacity, you're not going to make the same amount of money. You're not going to have the same type of results. So I think it's an investment in the business, which it wasn't looked at back then the same way at all. And obviously the game is so much more physical today than it's ever been. So I think it's a necessity. I mean, that they're tearing those bodies apart. So if you don't get proper treatment, I don't think they would last very long at all.
Yeah, it's true. And I think you're almost at a disadvantage now if you don't have that entourage, quote unquote, with you, of someone traveling.
I agree. I think it's probably a necessity now. So, I mean, it obviously adds to the expense, and that's what people are complaining about a little bit on the tour now, but it's hard to break in, because if you don't have that, you absolutely are at a disadvantage.
So in regards to equipment, how do you see tennis equipment progressing and getting better from here? I feel like there's different materials and types of strings and rackets, but what else is there? What do you see on the horizon?
The rackets are getting a little bit more flexible. It seems like the last couple of years, there are certainly rackets that they're starting to address it, because people are not going away from polyester strings, which have changed the landscape quite a bit. Polyester strings with a stiff racket is not a good combination. Everybody understands that. But I think what they're doing now is they're trying to blend. It's still graphite. It's still going to be graphite, but they're blending things into the graphite to try to mute it a little bit, to try to make it a little bit more dampening from a vibration standpoint. And every manufacturer is trying different processes. But the shape of a racket is not going to change any. That's kind of been standardized. They've played around with that in the past, but I think that's set. So. I think that the rackets they're doing a decent job of trying to do that. I think the strings are also evolving. The polyester strings, they're trying hard to make them softer. But again, polyester costs almost nothing to make. And we have an economic process here. And I think if you can make cheap polyester and sell it for ridiculous margins, the incentive is not really there to make a wonderful soft polyester that's going to be the best of both worlds. So some companies are trying it, but it becomes an expensive process. And now they, make it almost out of reach. So people buy the cheap polyester, and because it's available, and the manufacturers are very happy to supply it because it costs them basically nothing to make. So, soft multifilaments and natural gut are expensive to make. Polyester is dirt cheap. And unfortunately, economics rule that, but from a racket standpoint, I think there's some progress. Yeah.
That's the classic, whatever's best for the person isn't necessarily best for the business, but.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Well, perfect. Well, we're running out of time a little bit, but any final questions at all, Michael?
I don't think so. I really appreciate your time and answering, just all our questions and getting to know more.
We could talk a long time about this and go into other routes, but if any of our followers want to find you and the eTennis website, where can they find you at? What's your website, phone number? And you're located in Winter Park, correct?
Inner Park, right off Fairbanks, a block from Skycraft, which most people know where that is, but a couple of blocks off I-4. But our website is eTennisonline.com. And our phone number is 407-673-9200.
Perfect. And we'll put links down in the description below everything, so everyone can have easy access to it and click on it, and we can get them on the website and get them calling you, coming in about questions and stuff. But I'm not going to let you off that quick. So you got to answer the Fab 5 questions, and then we'll call it a day. Are you ready? Okay.
I guess. I don't even know what this means, but
surprise. There you go. What book are you reading right now?
Oh, interesting. I am reading Ken Follett book. I just picked it up.
What was the last book you read?
No, I'm going to give you this one. My wife is getting it for me because
no worries.
It actually has to do with Vikings and stuff, so I'm actually quite.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. Nice. Okay, well, as she's getting the book, what's your favorite restaurant in Orlando?
Ooh. Thylicious in Longwood.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah, we have a running poll right now of the top 3 restaurants around Orlando. Hillstone's always on that list. Enzo's on the water is on that list, and Kabuki Sushi just moved in the top 3. I would say here. Everyone is loving Kabuki, so that just moved into our top 3 there. So everyone goes there. So I love Winter Park Fish Company too. I think that has excellent fish around here and stuff. So
the evening and the morning by Ken Follett.
And the morning.
Yes.
Perfect. So number 3, how many hours of sleep do you get a night?
7.5.
Oh, good. I'm a 6 to 8 guy. As long as I get 6 to 8, I can function good, work out hard, see patients and run a business. If I start creeping below 6, I get kind of irritable and stuff like that. How about you, Michael?
I'm the same. If I get anywhere from 6 to 7, I'm usually pretty good. But anything less than that, I'm groggy for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Number 4 is, are you doing anything new or different to stay healthy and optimize health?
No, I am not doing enough.
There you
No,
Okay.
I go in spurts, and I unfortunately right now I'm not in a good place. I used to ride my bike more, and I used to do this and that, and I'm in between. I'm teaching it quite a bit, so I'm on the court so much now, and my training has slacked. And last year was a disaster from a tournament perspective, so I didn't have any tournaments to look forward to. So I was just in maintenance mode. But I'm yes. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. The good news. The good news is that you only need 20 or 30 minutes of moderate cardio to maintain heart health. So it's not like you have to do a lot, but that's good. I'm going to call you out on that. We'll have to follow up like a couple months from now to make sure that he's doing something. Okay. The last question is, what type of tennis racket are you using?
Dunlop 200 CX.
Dunlop.
Nice.
Not many using Dunlop anymore.
No, they come back around. They're doing a push now, and
Are they? Okay.
yeah. No, it's a good product there, but I'm not. That's where I am right now. I'm not one of those that have been loyal to one brand for my whole life. I float a little bit based, but it's a nice flexible racket, and it does what I'm looking for. I mean, I'm not interested in getting injured and stuff. So I mean, it fits that good category in my book in terms of comfort and everything else. But there's a lot of good rackets out there, and I just I mix it up a little bit.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, perfect. It sounds good. Well, I think my 1 o'clock patients come in. Tobias, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us. Thank you, Dr. Fabric, for also joining us. And we will definitely be in touch. And thank you for making Orlando a better place.
Thank you very much. And I'll come in and you'll fix my back, right?
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. Appreciate it.
See you guys. Yep.